Welcome to another VC Wisdom Pod. We have Paul Anthony Claxton with us. He's an AI venture capitalist, writer, and speaker on AI and venture capital. He's been featured in the San Diego Business Journal for the under 40 US Marine veterans, who brings that discipline in. Today, we're going to talk about AI, of course. We're going to talk about VC funding, just like we were talking prior to this conversation. Podpire is presenting that one. That is my podcasting company. If you want to start your own pod with AI and monetize it through YouTube AdSense, through lead generation and sponsor checks, you can go to podpire.com. We have a free ebook teaching you how to do so. Paul, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Charles. Paul Anthony Claxton. My background actually originates from the Marine Corps, where I spent 10 years of my life. Originally operating as an infantryman, completing 4 tours in Iraq. But where I got my first exposure to technology was when I ran a command operations center from the years 2007 to the year 2009. So running a command operations center gave me really a different perspective and viewpoint to how wartime operations are conducted. Right, no longer was I boot on the ground, doing convoys across the combat theater of operations that we call Al Anbar province, Iraq. But now I was sitting in a war room, seeing it happen on a screen in front of me, drafting up reports on a weekly basis to the Pentagon and to a colonel and a brigadier general that I worked for. So it was at that point in time in the early 2000s where the U.S. military really went full bore on implementing predictive technologies. Early on AI technologies, predictive analytics, data science type stuff, drone technologies, UAVs, et cetera, right? So that's kind of where I really got my first true exposure to technology. And quite honestly, I loved it. I loved the cutting edge technologies. I loved learning new things. And I also, loved what we could do with these technologies and where they could take us, how they could potentially save lives on the battlefield, but also improve the effectiveness of the everyday modern soldier and U.S. Marine. So from there, I decided to carry on my career into the private sector. I've done everything from leading IT sales divisions for Fortune 500 companies to working 100% commission jobs in tech-based sales, people-based sales, et cetera. Worked at a marketing firm, project management. So did quite a few things at the low and high levels of the industry. And then from there, I said, I wonder what's next for me. So can I write a new chapter, or do I continue in the journey of this book that I'm on? So the new chapter for me was going into entrepreneurship, launching my career as an entrepreneur, right? And so I've been bootstrapping companies, building companies from the ground up, which is really where I like to live and breathe is a person, right? I think that's the Marine in me, is getting out onto the field, getting into the heat of the battle and really just being a tactical player, right? And also a strategic player, but being a tactical player on the field of business, on the war front of business. So I've been bootstrapping companies. Ultimately, my work in terms of networking and building business relationships and bootstrapping my companies and building relationships with customers and strategic partners led me into private equity. So I've been in private equity for 6 of the last 10 years as an entrepreneur, ultimately launching my own VC firm a couple years ago. So today, my VC firm is Q1 Velocity. We write checks for early stage companies, seed and Series A. And we're looking at companies that have a specific AI centric use case in terms of IoT enablement, how that AI product or service or solution that they're building enables the business environment or the consumer environment from an IoT standpoint, how it enables us from a SaaS standpoint, right? And by enablement, I mean progressively make AI more sustainable, make it more progressive, move it forward, right? Or change the way that we do business and consume for the better, right? So you talk about like taking the Model T forward to the electric vehicles that we have today. The Model T forward was not sustainable, hence the way AI is now. But we can make it more sustainable, like an electric vehicle. With that being said, having a Model T Ford is certainly better than walking or riding a horse. I think we would all agree. So we're still better off having AI with where it's at right now, but we need to make it better, right? And so that's what my mission is as a VC firm. Additionally, very involved in a private equity AI communities in terms of thought leadership. Have my own explainable AI podcasts. I do quite a bit of blogging and writing for well-known publications, and I just try to be involved and contribute back to the community. Additionally, outside of my VC firm, I do run a chapter for a Silicon Valley syndicate, and I run the LA chapter, so I do private syndications as well. So that's kind of my background and how I got to where I'm at over the last 25 years, dating
Right.
myself.
Let's start with your decades-long background in the infantry as a sergeant. So, what lessons did you gain from that? I mean, a lot of people come back from a decade-long service with PTSD, right? So, what did you learn from that, and how do you scale with that experience nowadays?
I I never got evaluated to see if I have PTSD or not, but I definitely had a lot of difficulty transitioning from an environment like the military, right, where everything is expected, right, and then to an environment like the private sector, where you may not know if you're going to have a job the next day. At will employment, you do not know what the market is necessarily going to do and how that's going to affect your career, right? So moving from an expected environment to an unexpected environment was difficult. It requires a complete 180-degree mind shift, and I had some trouble dealing with that. But I think how I got out of it was, centering back in on a purpose and letting that purpose be, my personal mission for everything that I do in life and in business, right? And so centering in on that purpose and doing things that can facilitate that purpose um, was really the key to how I got here, right? And you know, it kind of leaning on those 10 years of experience and really digging into that mindset that was grafted into me, as a Marine, right? That was cemented into me, is that you know we find a way no matter what, and we don't quit, and we continuously learn and we continuously get better, and we don't look at setbacks or as a failure. We look at it as really an opportunity to learn. So I failed a lot to get here, and I would quite honestly prefer to fail and learn from it than to have success and celebrate from it. Success is great, but we need to have learning experiences, so we need to have that failure, right? So enjoying the process of failure has allowed me to get to where I'm at, and then being in venture capital has allowed me to put money from a fiduciary standpoint, to put money and capital behind things that matter and fulfill my purpose to continue to serve the world, right? This time, not in the military, but through my business endeavors.
Right. And how did that resilience mentality was reflected in you in the recent LFIers?
So I think, ultimately my purpose has been to serve the community, right? Like I said, I don't do that in the military anymore, but I can do it through my business endeavors. And, our firm is based in LA, actually on Spring Street, which little known fact that maybe some of our listeners may not know is that Spring Street was actually considered the Wall Street of the West. So it's ironic that I have a financial firm based on the old Wall Street of the West. But with our firm based there, we're very fortunate that it did not affect us and affect our operations, which is a good thing, because we see that we see every problem as an opportunity, to continue to serve the community at scale, right? And so, I'm personally very much so looking at, how can we use AI, and implement and leverage AI, to prevent some of these things from maybe happening again. For example, like agricultural type technologies, AI technologies, disaster proof type AI technologies that can help us gather enough data to not only help us make decisions, but let's make decisions to build better products that can prevent some of these things happening.
Right. Tell me a bit more about your VC business. Who do you raise money from, and what kind of businesses and founder do you invest in nowadays?
So I obviously I can't say names about who we've raised money from, but um, high net worth individuals and family offices, I can say that. Those are typically the people or the organizations that would align with our mission, as family offices, maybe fund the funds from time to time, but really centered in on high net worth individuals that also have a mission like ours, and family offices, that's really the best fit for our thesis. It can be, sometimes it can be maybe institutional organizations that have a kind of a capitalistic mission with a philanthropic tune to it, so to speak, that aligns with our mission. So that's who we've raised money from. In terms of the types of companies that we would invest in, I think that was your second question. Yeah.
Yeah, some correct characteristics of the founders and the businesses that you invest in, if you have a list.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we do work with the DoD. So our firm has a dual use focus, which, so if any of the listeners are unfamiliar with dual use, that means, we want companies that have a public sector and a private sector initiative. So companies that have a use case, at the government level, so for example, at the you could say at the government level, but also at the policy level, right? Which doesn't necessarily have to be government, but at the policy level, you know, so we can be talking about, for example, things in terms of infrastructure, how city planning committees do things and whatnot, right? And the types of, technologies and products that might be attractive to them, So, and some of that may involve private companies, at the policy level, and some of it may involve government. So companies with a dual use focus. Um, in terms of companies that we would invest in, I mentioned IoT, and kind of more of consumer driven like technologies before. I mentioned that before. So I'm going to give a couple of examples of companies that maybe would be important to us. We can look at AI as not sustainable right now, in its current format. It's really not. And I think with the evolution of DeepSeek coming about has raised awareness about the fact that we've missed some things, obviously. We can certainly produce AI at a much more sustainable rate, and literally, and not limited to, but in terms of costs, we can do it at a much more sustainable rate, I think. So it's really, companies that are AI core centric focused, that are building products and services and platforms that make AI more sustainable. Again, taking that Model T forward to like an electric vehicle, right? And so on. The other side of the spectrum is companies that are changing the user experience. They're changing the way that we do business or the way that we consume. A great example is ChatGPT. I think many would agree, for the better, changed the entire user experience for the internet base of users, right? And additionally for social media. So it's changed up how industries operate and gather information and make decisions on a global scale. I mean, I know it's made my work a lot easier as well in terms of insights that I'm able to gather and work that I have to do. So those are companies that we would look at. Okay. Um, Now, again, that has to tie back to SaaS and IoT. We don't invest in hardware, generally speaking. Hardware is very hard to scale, you know. So, it needs to have IoT enablement or SaaS enablement type of focus. Does it make sense?
Yes, I'm curious also why you chose the VC business model and not just become another consultant. For example, like you get paid on a yearly basis for the time that you invest in the fund, plus you also get a return if these companies pan out in 5 to 10 years. Is that the logic?
So I've been a consultant. I am a consultant and advisor. Um, that would fall into my other firm, the professional services firm, which is Reciprocity ROI, where we do private syndications or private securities type syndications, right? Um, which is not about raising money. It's we're not my firm Reciprocity is not a broker. We're an investor relations firm, so it's a little bit different. But so that is consulting in its true sense. But in terms of the fund, I really see, and I think many would agree that I really see AI moving at an exponential pace right now. I see it moving 100 miles an hour, and it's increasing. The speed of AI development is increasing. AI is very it's very self feeding, so to speak, and that it grows on itself, right? So it's self proliferating. And with that being said, I think at that the pace that AI is moving really makes VC a lot more attractive to the AI influenced investor, right? We're going to see earlier exits. That's what I mean. We're not looking at yes, we're a 10-year fund, but we're not looking at this typical 7 to 10 year exits. We're looking at more of like 3 to 5 years, of probably 5 years of a sweet spot in terms of exiting, especially at the seed and Series A level where we invest. So the ability to make money in this industry is ripe. It's rife with opportunity right now, and that is obviously I'm here to make money, but the ability to make an impact is even more plethora with opportunity, right? And so is a byproduct or equivalent, downstream equivalent of that, we're gonna make money because we make an impact.
Right. Tell me about your day to day. You seem to be into fitness as well, Goggins style, going to run in the heat with
Yeah,
boots and so
I'm into
forth.
fitness.
Yeah, tell me about that. Like, what habits do you nurture nowadays to increase your mental performances?
Absolutely. I just turned 43 this past October. It's crazy. I still run like 3 miles in like 19 minutes. It's ridiculous. You can do like 100 push-ups nonstop. But no, I've been into fitness all my life, ever since I was in high school, on the varsity wrestling team, varsity cross country and whatnot. But then transitioning into the Marine Corps, fitness became even more of a staple of my life. Used to be a amateur power lifter, competitive powerlifting, and I got out of that competitive stage, but more so it's just a competition with myself to age gracefully. So in terms of, fitness, it really is about the mind, body, spirit for me. Is like, you know, you go through a lot to become a venture capitalist. You go through a lot to stay a venture capitalist, right? And it can, it can, it can pull and tug on your emotions and your spirit. And the objective of any businessman or woman, um, or venture capitalist, is not to become jaded, right? There's a quote that says, if you want a peaceful life, don't go into venture capital. Um, so, the thing is that you don't want to become jaded and let that suck away at your spirit. So keep your spirit up, go back to your purpose, and just stay geared in on why you're doing this, right? Because there's going to be a lot of people and things that are going to try to tear you down, and you can't let it, right? So fitness and the spirit, and that starts with yourself, and it starts with having good people around you. And yeah, I think the more you do this, you'll find that you don't need a lot of people around you, but you just need a few good people. So we say in the Marine Corps is the Marine Corps is looking for a few good men and women, right? So we don't, the Marine Corps doesn't want everyone. We just want a few good ones, and that's why we're good. That's why we're really good. So there's that, and then it's the exercising of the mental, right? Um, I'm always reading. I've been in several business books, from visionary leadership to even a book coming out by a gentleman named Ray First, Rafe First, Furst, called The Future of Venture Capital. So, you know, it's reading, and it's not just reading, but practical application of contributing to the community in this space, whether it's in a book or it's a post on LinkedIn. So that is the exercising of the mental part, right? Making your mind better. And then the physical part is always making time for your fitness, right? Because at the end of the day, one of the reasons why, say, for example, the military, going back to my military mindset, one of the reasons why the Marine Corps is so pressed on having Marines that are basically triathletes, why are they so pressed on that? Is because when your physicality starts to wane, your mind goes, right. And if you don't have the physical endurance, your mind is going to go, right. And so that's what goes first, is your physical, then your mind goes. It's not your mind then physical, right. So if you got your physical endurance, i could probably work I could probably work every night this week with like 1 hour of sleep, but I would push through, if I really had to, right? Because I have that physical endurance to do it, and that's what's going to allow my mental capacity to persist. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Last but not least, tell me about the podcast. What's your thesis behind it? What do you want to accomplish?
Oh, this podcast.
No, you're starting one, right? Understanding AI, believe it's called, or something like that.
Oh, yeah, 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 I'm sorry. So I'm a member and also an ambassador to an organization called the AI Accelerator Institute. I do writing for them. Usually about once a quarter, I'll write an article. There's about 2 million members in the community. They have a few different podcasts on AI. I host the podcast, co-host the podcast with a gentleman named Rowan Hall, who's also an AI entrepreneur. And together, we have guests there, and we talk about all things AI and how it's essentially, broken down into something that we understand, explainable AI, right? From a human standpoint and a technical and operational standpoint, explain it, right? And so that podcast airs on Spotify and iTunes and other streaming sources. But yeah, that's all about the podcast. And that, again, that podcast is hosted under the AI Accelerator Institute.
Do you receive guests? Do you interview them? Do you want to get sponsors? What's the end goal?
I would love sponsors, but the end goal is to put great um, to put great perspective, both biased and unbiased. I think we need both. But to put unbiased and biased perspective out into the AI community, um, for people's own perspectives, for them to be able to form their own perspectives, for them to find out the answers to the unknown unknowns, and for them to also find out the answers to the things that they know that they don't know, right? And so, it's really about contributing back to the community through the knowledge of aspiring AI professionals and investors, um, or long practitioners of the AI, that are either investors or technologists in the AI field of AI. So ultimately, it's that is the mission, is to make AI a force for good. But AI is a force for good, doesn't become a force for good on its own. It starts with people, community, bonding, and then knowledge sharing, and using that knowledge for pure and good purposes, right? And working together, to ultimately, integrate products into our society, platform services and products into our society for good cause, right? That are going to fill gaps, fill needs, or provide, or fill unfilled needs, right? Or fill needs in a better way, right? And so that's what the mission is. Love sponsors. Would love to talk about having more guests on. Very, very, always very open to that. And you never know what happens when you have conversations. But you got to have the conversations, right? It's like Michael Jordan says, I failed more times than I can count, but I wouldn't have won if I didn't fail, right? So I missed more than 9,000 shots in my career, but you know how the quote goes. But he had to take those shots and fail, and he's considered the GOAT today. Sorry if there's any LeBron James fans on here, but I consider Michael Jordan the GOAT.
Yeah, no, I do think so. Just I think LeBron had a longer career, right? Like linked your campaign and linked your
Yeah.
time to accomplish what he did. I think that LeBron is better mentally, though. Like his mental game is set, and he's more systematic than Michael Jordan, which I think relied more on talent.
Yeah.
Jordan was a gambler,
Yep.
and all of that. LeBron seems to be more stable and more focused on skill and being the
Yep.
greatest, right? And I think I respect more the latter, but I would agree that yeah, Jordan is widely considered more the goat. Um, Podcast, generally speaking, yeah, I started them as well because I was obsessed with giving out value out there. Actually, I thought I wasn't
Yeah.
giving enough value. Then I was hooked on the knowledge side of it and getting insights from guests, right? So that's what kept me going. But after that, what really kept me going was like money and getting paid by AdSense and so forth. I think it's so important as founders to close the serotonin loop, right? Like the money comes in, it's motivating, you're learning, you're giving out free value, and ultimately you can grow your pod organically, scalably, the LeBron way if you want. I want to ask you as a final question: what's next for you this year? What do you have in your plans?
Wow. That's a great question. I well, first off, I love to, just on a personal basis, I love to travel the world. I have a country. I've been to a lot of countries, but there's a few that I haven't been to: Africa, India, um, Japan. I got a buddy who fought in. So if you're familiar with the mixed martial arts community, he fought in Bellator,
Yep.
which is the big competitor UFC. But we were been friends 20 some years, and we've always talked about going to Japan together. So I want to make that happen. But outside of personal endeavors, um, I've been wanting to write a book for some. I've contributed to books, as I've said earlier. I've appeared in books with some of my concepts, whatever. But I would say, I want to get a book written. I've got a story to tell. seen a lot in my life in my short 43 years. Crazy stuff. But ultimately, I'd like to get a book written at some point. Um, there's going to have to be more books because there's going to be more crazy stories, right? But I've certainly got enough for a novel right now, a nonfiction novel based on the experiences in my life. So at least a part one. So I want to do that. I don't know if that means doing it part-time in my free time while I'm running the fund, or taking a little bit of a sabbatical and doing it, but that's my goal. I would say outside of that is to maximize our fund, get some really great investments done, deploy some capital, and really maximize some of the investments into our strongest portfolio companies and really finish that vision out. And then 2026 is really going to be, I think, and hopefully the beginning of the harvesting period of those, kind of the sweet spot of the harvesting period of those investments, and kind of start to begin to hopefully realize some of our exit strategies, and begin, preparing to raise our second fund. That would be my goal this year, I think. Yep.
Love it. Cool. Very nice objectives. And yeah, going to see Bellator in Japan would definitely be on my list as well. Seems like a cool experience. And even the UFC, right? I get bored pretty easily, but as a mixed martial artist myself, I would love to see the strategy at play, and especially the mindset, right? Like what happens
Yeah.
between rounds and before the matchup, and observe all these details. UFC, I'm still very bullish on the UFC as a brand, right? As a company, definitely would invest in that one. I don't. They're not on public markets. I think they should be. Paul, where can we find out more about you and your company?
So there's not too many Paul Anthony Claxtons on LinkedIn with my skin tone, but you'll find me on LinkedIn if you just go through my name there. AI Venture Capitalist, it's on my profile. The other way to find me or find my contact information is to simply just go to my CV site, which is www.paulclaxton.io. And I've got my contact information there in the footer of the website.